Hello, everybody, and anyone who's still groggy from watching the. Hold on, I'm gonna start that over. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. I'm Dave Turner, along with Pat Pickens, and I know some of you out there might be a little groggy today who stayed up to watch all of the Chicago and Nashville series, the game that went into 3 overtimes before Brent Seabrook finally ended. Pat, I know you watch a lot of it. It's a little bit rough when you have to watch those games that go to 2 in the morning on the East Coast, huh?
I'm still rubbing the sleep out of my eyes here a little bit. First things first, bad job by the schedule makers. I know you got to get a second game out west late after the first game, but an 8:30 local time start in Chicago on a Tuesday night. That sounds like straight up the NBA alley. But what a game! What a finish! We'll talk more about that in a minute. But that's the second multi-overtime game of the series, and the second one the Hawks won, and you just get the sense that you get the feeling it's over now for Nashville here.
Yeah, speaking of another series that's over, we'll start out east.
Mm-hmm.
The Montreal Canadiens against the Ottawa Senators. A lot of people might have even picked the Senators or really felt that they were the hot team coming in. Montreal, overtime and just being able to play well late in games. They just seem to have an answer for everything. Up 3-0. Montreal's a veteran team. I think it's a foregone conclusion. At least we would all think that this series is over probably in 4, if not 5. Pat, what have you seen from that series in terms of just the Canadiens being able to sort of counterpunch anything that Ottawa has been able to throw at them?
It's interesting because we had Connor McKenna on here in our playoff preview, and being of Montreal, he didn't like the matchup. He thought it was a bad one, and obviously Ottawa had beaten Montreal a couple of years ago. And Montreal's a flawed team. There's no question about it. And this is kind of where moral victories why moral victories can't be taken seriously in professional sports. Because, you can make the case that, oh, man, Ottawa was so close. They were in it to end of regulation, consecutive games. I mean, every game in the series has been a one-goal game. And look what happens. Ottawa's behind 3-0. I imagine Boston Bruins fans are – I've seen Boston Bruins fans are broken up just because they missed out to Ottawa, and now Ottawa is going to get swept out of the playoffs. Andrew Hammond, the nice story. Craig Anderson was really fantastic in Game 3.
Yeah, he was.
And it's unfortunate that, a bounce to Dale Weiss and then a bad goal he gives up in overtime, and suddenly his team's behind. But, I think it feels like Montreal got Ottawa's best punch in Game 3 and dealt it back at them. I don't think this series is going to last even to Game 5 in Montreal. What's interesting to me, Dave, this would be the second straight first-round sweep for Montreal if they can polish it off. They did it to Tampa last year. But, Montreal is just, polished and poised, and this is barely turning into a really solid matchup for them.
Yeah, I think that they're going to close it out here. And you have to wonder if that's going to be a big edge for them, either against Tampa or Detroit. We'll get into that series in a couple seconds here. But for Montreal, they have to be feeling good. They've gotten clutch goal scoring when they need it, and the goaltending has been there certainly. Where, look, Montreal, as much as they were kind of maligned going into the playoffs, I don't know if they're afraid of anyone. Maybe I'm sure the Rangers down the road might scare them, but Tampa Bay's look beatable, and certainly if it ends up being Detroit, I don't think they're scared of them at all. But
I'm starting to get that vibe. If Detroit, advances, you got to think that this is opening up for Montreal because Tampa Bay was so good against Montreal during the regular season. 5 wins. 5 wins is impressive. The other thing about Montreal polishing it off, and this is basically every potential sweep, is Nathan Beaulieu's got a concussion. Is what the word is. They're calling it upper body, but that would give him a chance to rest and then to get another defenseman back so that they can play with their full complement. You got to think that's pretty important for a team, especially a team like Montreal, who last year just completely ran out of gas defensively in that Eastern Conference Final Series.
Yeah, you would think that a sweep would go a long way for this team, especially because they know what it takes to navigate through a couple rounds here. Switching guns now to another series that I'm surprised as anyone at this one because I really thought Tampa Bay just had the superior roster, but I think you're seeing from Detroit that it's a team that is paced by guys like Henrik Zetterberg and Pavel Datsyuk, who's been fantastic, and they have a great coach. And you know what? Tampa Bay is definitely the more talented team on paper, I guess, but it really hasn't shown up so far. Pat, do you think Detroit can actually go out and win 2 more games here and win the series?
I don't, but I'm starting to, I feel I don't think Detroit still can win the series, but I feel less strong saying that than I did even Saturday. Because if you watch the game Saturday, Tampa Bay just took it to Detroit. I mean, game 1, Tampa Bay took it to Detroit, and Peter Mrazek stood on his head. And then game 2, Tampa Bay took it to Detroit, and they got some goals, and it was a rout, and it was like, okay, well, order's restored here. And I wonder, and you know, we both filled our brackets out together, and we both chose Washington over Tampa initially. I mean, then, you know, you go back and you do it, but because of coaching. And I wonder if John Cooper is in some trouble here, because this would be the second straight playoff flameout in a row if Detroit somehow beats them. And Detroit will have, and Tampa Bay would have had like you said, a more talented roster, a seasoned roster after last season, and then can't, you know, second straight playoff exit. You know, I know the window for Tampa is probably still next year, so maybe Cooper would get a break there. But I wonder, you know, you talk about coaching in terms of Babcock versus Cooper, and you know, you say he's getting outfoxed here, and how do you fix that? Well, you get a new coach. You know, you look at what Tampa did last night, and they did not, or whatever it was, Tuesday night, and they just did not generate the kind of offense. Obviously, you know, you had a big save. Brian Boyle got stopped on a breakaway later in the game, and it wasn't a really, you know, fast-paced game anyway. You know, there were only 43 shots combined, so it's not exactly like either side was tearing it up offensively. And it wasn't a speed game, and it was just kind of a muck and grind. But Tampa's got to find its way through that, because, you know, other teams are going to do that to the Lightning down the road. And you have to think that Tampa Bay is going to have to find a way to grind some of these games out here and not just, you know, steamroll teams like they did in game 2. You know, maybe this – I don't know what the story is with Tampa, because, again, they have the far superior roster. Game 4 is a huge game now for them.
Yeah, it really is. And not to bring up my cliche that I love to use, probably 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 too many times. You need to learn how to lose. You need to learn how to lose in the playoffs, and you need to learn how to win. Well, certainly they learned how to lose last year, Tampa Bay, but have they really learned how to win? I mean, they follow up a win with a very lackluster effort after they dominate game 2 and they go out and look really flat in game 3. And I think, you know, you have to learn how to kind of navigate through these series where there's going to be ups and downs. You're going to win games you should lose, and you're going to lose games you probably should win sometimes. And even then, you have to come out and play your best effort every night. And I think that for a young team, you have to learn that kind of killer instinct, sort of like what we see with Chicago, where they always find a way to get it done because they've been there so many times before.
You say that, but there are some guys on that roster. I mean, there aren't many. I mean, Valtteri Filppula is a guy that comes to mind. Mm-hmm. Ryan Callahan comes to mind. You know, guys who have done it, guys who you can lean on a little bit. I mean, maybe Detroit has a little bit more playoff seasoning than Tampa does, but it's, you know, Detroit's roster isn't exactly playoff season either, besides guys like Zetterberg and Datsyuk and really Zalishki. I mean, who else on that Detroit roster has significant playoff series experience other than like last year's 5-game loss to the Bruins? I mean, it's not a roster clad with deep playoff or complete with deep playoff runs. It's
the coach has been there, and that goes
along. No, it's true. No, you're right. I agree with that. But and you know, we would be remiss if we didn't mention the goaltending, because Mrazek didn't face much. But you know, I mentioned the save he made on Boyle in the breakaway, and I mean that's a big save, and he stopped them all. So you know, you said it off air. First 2 shutouts of the postseason, Devin Dubnyk and Peter Mrazek. We all had that in the pool, right?
Yeah, really. I mean, those are the names that wouldn't even come up on anyone's radar prior to the season. So, all right, Pat, switching now to a series that has a pivotal one tonight. The Pittsburgh Penguins at home trailing 2-1 to the New York Rangers. We saw good from Pittsburgh in game 2. In game 3, they certainly hung around, but they just weren't getting any sort of volume of shots that you need to win a game on Henrik Lundqvist. I know they didn't even register a shot until a few minutes to go in the first period. That's how bad it was. Pittsburgh has done well to kind of keep themselves from kind of sinking in this series because they had all the two losses were 2-1. But do you think that they have enough to muster a Game 4 win against what really is a superior Ranger team?
You know, I thought about this after in the morning of Game 3, that those of us who may have not watched the Penguins as closely, particularly down the stretch, that, Malkin Crosby counts for something. Obviously, Crosby stole Game 2. And Fleury's been fantastic. You can't really say enough for how great he's been. And maybe he's finally starting to shake some of those playoff yips here a little bit, because this is the second straight postseason. Obviously, he made a crucial gaffe in one game, in a playoff game in the Columbus series last year. But other than that, Fleury's been terrific. But I thought that and it's mostly due to the defensive injuries, if Pittsburgh somehow beats the Rangers, this would be the biggest upset probably in 5 years in the playoffs, just because for all the talent and the skill that Pittsburgh has, it just is. The Penguins are a mess. I mean, between the penalties they take and between the defense, I mean, they just have this really undisciplined, sloppy, and lackluster demeanor that surrounds them. I mean, they can be confident and say the right things, but I've watched the Rangers a lot this year, as so many of you listening know, that this is a team that has kind of defied the expectations of them, and you can say the same thing about the Penguins, only the other way. So the Rangers have been a terrific road team the whole year. I mean, they're probably a better road. They probably are suited to play road games better, just because they're not necessarily flashy offensively, although they do have some real skill and talent. But I mean, they seem to grind it out, and especially on the road. You want to talk about playoff-tested coaches, players, teams, etc. I don't think the Rangers will have much trouble in Game 4.
Yeah, I don't think so either. You almost see from the Rangers that maybe a younger team, a less proven team, would go out there and feel the need to press for that goal to make it 3-0 or something like that. Mm-hmm. But the Rangers just know that they can kind of lock it down.
Yeah.
And they're able to sort of they're not worried about a 1-goal lead, because they know they have the defense, they know they have the goaltending, and they also know that, look, if you make a mistake, they're going to go the other way with it.
Yeah. You can't say enough really about Dan Girardi's Game 2.
Oh,
he was terrific. And what's interesting is that he has 3 assists in this series, obviously all secondaries, but that's 3 more points than Evgeny Malkin has.
That is true.
So, I mean, and I thought Malkin has been good in stretches in this series, but I mean, and not necessarily good, but involved. He's driven play at times, especially the games in New York. But again, like moral victories, you don't get paid in the NHL to drive play in the playoffs. You get paid to score goals in the playoffs. So, I mean, if the Penguins have any chance in this series, they got to get Malkin going here a little. And David Perron. David Perron's been a no-show, and they give up a first-round pick for him. And they're staring at a potential 3-1, or it could be a 5-game series with a closeout game Friday without David Perron scoring a goal, which would be a catastrophic thing. And Dave, real fast while we were on this, did you hear the Rutherford rant after Game 3?
Yeah, I did.
It's interesting because it seems like the fallout from this was that the columnists might have been the problem. I wonder what your take on that is.
Yeah, it's just hard to tell at this point because, I mean, you hear so much either way. I like not to speculate on those kind of things, but...
Yeah, no, I guess, but the thing is that I take from that, is it feels like the GM's feeling the heat here, which, I was talking with some guys before game 2, and we all kind of agreed that the coach could be in trouble, but the GM was safe. But now, I mean, after you see that and hear that PR nightmare in a city like Pittsburgh, I mean, that could be a problem for both now.
Yeah, I just always feel that you never know what happens before that. I mean, sure, if we go by the book, we know what he said. He cursed at him a couple times, told him to go sell ice cream. Those things are kind of weird, but I just always feel that you'd never know what the lead up, maybe a couple days before, or maybe, he was overheard talking very critically of the team, the writers. So to me, we do know that he freaked out, and that's because he's probably very worried about his job or just the team as a whole. But I think it kind of mirrors where this team is right now, because offensively there is a very good team, or should be a very good team, the Penguins. But without Chris Letang out there, they have no ability to break the puck out. And with the Rangers being such a good defensive team, I don't see them doing anything to extend the series. I think it's over in 5.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now we'll go to a series that will not end in 5 games. And it's a series that could have ended in 4 games if you think about it, Dave. The last show at the Coliseum is turning into an epic right now, with the Caps stealing game 4, 2-1 in overtime thanks to Nicklas Backstrom's goal in overtime. Dave, Caps and Islanders is turning into an old Patrick Division special. It's starting to feel like it might go 7. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it is going to go 7. It's been a great series so far. I think you have 2 teams that are really evenly matched. Maybe not for the same reasons, but look, Alex Ovechkin has been so good, and he's continued that. And Backstrom is scoring goals now, which is big, because he actually wasn't scoring going into the playoffs, and that's huge. But and for the Islanders, they get goals from their entire lineup. It could be anyone, and then JT has been so good. That overtime winner is one of the fastest in overtime history in the playoffs, and that arena absolutely. I'm surprised that the top of the building didn't come off, to be honest, when he won in Game 3, and certainly Backstrom silenced him in Game 4. And I'll tell you right now, look, the Caps do have home ice, but I wouldn't make that as a huge point to decide the series. But for me, it's going 7, and then anything can happen.
Here's my thing, and here's what I'll say about the series that I've seen. First off, good call on Backstrom. He's been fantastic, and it's finally it's time to start recognizing Nicklas Backstrom, and maybe it's the Barry Trotz influence that they're telling him to shoot the puck more, because for a while he was way too unselfish, and trying to set up number 8, and he's just 3 goals in this series. He's been fantastic. First, did you see the hit Tom Wilson laid on Visnovsky?
I didn't see that one, actually. I was working up until the end of the game, so I didn't.
So Wilson plows Visnovsky. Visnovsky had to leave the game, and Wilson goes for charging, but man, what a hit! It felt like a momentum changer, and so there's that. But it just feels like the Islanders are blowing every opportunity to take this series by the throat. They had Game 2 in Washington. They're up 3-1 in Game 2. Everything's going. They're going to go up 2-0 back to the Coliseum. They blow the lead. They lose the game. They win that. First off, I had to rewatch that goal that Tavares scored in Game 3 just because I had no idea how it went in. And what a play by Tavares in that Game 3. And you hear all the stories of the craziness of the Coliseum, whether it's chair stealing, whether it's beer throwing, whether it's police officers acting corruptly. It's Long Island. What do you expect? But you get to that, you get to 1-1 in overtime, with a chance to take the series by the throat, and you give up that goal. It's just, it feels like it. And I'll be honest, Capitals don't have a great record in Game 7s on home ice, and the Islanders haven't won a playoff series in 22 years. So I think the Caps are the better team, and I think the Caps are going to win the series still. I think it actually could be 6 in this series, but honestly, who knows at this point?
Yeah, it really is a toss-up, and
I'm really great. This series has been really fantastic too, which is the best part about it is that it's the old rivals, the Caps and Islanders, And if it goes 7, it's been a great series. But you just get the sense that the Islanders could have swept number one. Probably should be up 3-1 right now, given how well they played. They've been the better team in stretches, and it seems like the Caps are just hanging around with skill and grinding it. I feel like we haven't seen the Capitals' best 60 or more than that game. And fun fact, Dave, do you know that the Islanders have now lost 3 of their last 4 home playoff games that have gone to overtime?
Wow, so that's actually a surprising thought, considering that you would consider the old barn as a tough place to play in. But I guess that's the beauty of overtime hockey is it takes a single moment, a single play, and it doesn't really matter what ice you play it on.
No, similar series in terms of rocking barns, but also similar to the Canadiens and Senators. Dave, the Ducks can go for the throat and shut down Winnipeg tonight in Game 4. The whiteout was so fantastic, and you want to talk about roofs coming off the building during that Game 3, and yet somehow the Ducks found the third period magic again. Dave, the Ducks have outscored the Jets 6-0 in the third period of these games so far this series. I mean, you have to believe that that's in Winnipeg's head now, right?
Oh, absolutely, and that's been the Ducks' MO all year, is that they're a good third period team, and they're showing they're a good overtime team too. I have to give Winnipeg a little bit of credit because I thought they played pretty well to keep these games close. And look, you can even make the case that possibly the series is at least 2-1 or even 2-1 in favor of Winnipeg. But at the end of the day, it's not, and that's what matters. And to me, the Ducks have just been able to take the best hit that Winnipeg has and find a way to get it done. And that's what it's about in the playoffs. It doesn't always have to be pretty. It's not going to be easy. And Anaheim is just able to kind of find a way to win these games. And I'm sure they'd love to win in 4 so that if the other series goes a little deeper, that they're able to be rested and ready to go. I would think, especially with Dustin Byfuglien and him pulling a Marshawn Lynch kind of moment, I think that you're going to see the Ducks win tonight, which would be a shame to see Winnipeg lose 2 at home. But I think the Ducks will just find a way when it matters.
I agree. And you mentioned Byfuglien. He's been really bad, or he was really not good in Game 3 as far as the extracurricular stuff. And we kind of talked about this a little bit yesterday, that this is a playoff season player. This is a guy who has won the Stanley Cup. This isn't some guy in his first go around as a leader on a postseason team. It almost looked like that in Game 3, that Byfuglien was getting frustrated and he was taking it out. He had the couple penalties, the dumb one on Perry after the goal. It's almost like, that's why you think that Anaheim is in Winnipeg's head, because you get that, these dumb plays that Winnipeg's making. And, oh, by the way, Corey Perry, 5 points so far in 3 games. And what's incredible to me about Anaheim, and this is really their MO, is the depth in scoring. Is you look at Jakob Silfverberg's been fantastic, and Getzlaf has been making play, and Ryan Kessler, so maligned in Vancouver. The guys who have points up there, they have 12 players who have scored points in 3 games. And you can only expect for that to go on and go on. And, it's just that's kind of been the MO of the team all year. You mentioned the third periods too. And, these Ducks look a little bit different. And based on the way the other Pacific Division series is going, this thing's kind of opening up for them.
Yeah, I might have to start eating my crow on the Ducks because I was kind of down on them.
Nice job there by you, Crow and Ducks.
Yeah, I get one every now and then. But no, really, the Ducks have looked good. I think that they are showing the depth that I didn't think they have. And the goaltending has been there. And to me, that was the biggest question mark. But, we'll see. Who knows? maybe Winnipeg gets this one, but I don't know. I think the Ducks have just kind of found an answer.
I would like to see Winnipeg get a game, take it back to Anaheim. The series has been way too good for it. The series has been way too much fun for it to end in a sweep.
Exactly. Now, speaking of another surprising series, the Calgary Flames go up 3-1 on the Vancouver Canucks. I guess you can chalk it up to same old with Vancouver, but it's not really the same team. But Calgary, though, I mean, they're, to quote Dick Vitale here, the diaper dandies of the NHL. They've been great. I mean, Sam Bennett comes in, 19 years old. He's been really good. Michael Furland. I mean, is there anything that Bob Hartley isn't doing right now to kind of plug every right button to get this team where they are?
First things first, let's start with Chris Russell leading the team in playoff points right now, 4 in 4 games. That kind of tells you all you need to know. I mean, their D have been really active. Dennis Weidman has 3 points. TJ Brody, 3 points. Chris Russell, as already said, leading the team. But you mentioned the impact, the physical impact from Bennett, and Bennett's been terrific. There's really no two ways about it. He's been a play driver. He's been a difference maker. It's almost as if he doesn't care that he's that young and he's in the playoffs and he's in a rivalry. But Michael Furland has really been a difference maker in terms of physical, tough, playing on that line with Bennett. And I think the Canucks are, obviously lost Alexander Burrows at practice the other day. Big loss for the Canucks. He's been playing top line minutes with the Sedins, and he's been really, really good in that role. Kind of had to juggle some things, but again, this was a series that was 1-1 through 2 games, but the Canucks looked pretty dominant in game 2, and you had to think they were going to get one game in Calgary. And I'm running out of things to say about the Flames. Gaudreau has been fantastic, and Monahan's been terrific. I mean, and you look at the stats, it was 3-1 after 1 on Tuesday night. And the shots are 11-7 Vancouver. I mean, 3 goals on 7 shots, 4 saves for Eddie Lack. Now all of a sudden there's a goaltending controversy in Vancouver, although the reports now are coming out that Ryan Miller may not have been healthy, which is why they went with Lack to start the series. I could actually see Vancouver coming back and winning the series, but I'm not going to bet on it just because every time I pick against Calgary, and I'm not alone in this regard, every time I pick against Calgary, they go out and do something that stuns everybody.
Yeah, I agree with that. Where to me, Vancouver, they do have some veteran leadership on this team, and who knows what maybe Miller moving forward might be able to do. I wonder if again, getting back to my point of learning how to lose and learning how to win. What if Calgary is up 3-0 or 2-0, something like that in game 5, and they go out and lose? How do they respond to that? We haven't seen the flip side from the Canucks. I'm sorry, from the Flames. And not to say that it's going to do them in, because they could end up winning this in 5 for all we know, but I just wonder how they're going to react to adversity, that if they lose a game, even if it's in game 6 when they're home and all of a sudden it doesn't go as planned, what that's going to be like. Because to me, it's a slippery slope, because if you lose game 5 with them, you play a home game where if you don't win that, you almost kind of, you go back for game 7. So as much as the Flames have been very, very good to get to where they are, I'm not convinced that this still doesn't go 7 games.
No, I agree with that. But the interesting thing is, you mentioned dealing with adversity. They dealt with a lot of adversity in game 2. They had all those fights at the end of the game, and the frustration was finally starting to bubble over. And then what did they do? They just won 2 games on home ice and held serve. And I agree with you. I still think this could be a 7-game series. But, again, I picked the Canucks before the series to go to the conference final, and that pick is in some serious jeopardy right now.
Yeah, I did as well. So I guess we're both in that same boat. But speaking of another boat that's taking on water, the Nashville Predators kind of, Chicago does what Chicago does. Last night, the 3 overtime thriller, and it just seems like Chicago is that team that knows how to get it done, and Nashville just doesn't have an answer. And I'm not sure if it'll be 5, but what have you seen from that series? I thought Darling has been very good, and credit to Quenneville for going with him, because he's kept them in the series.
Yeah, no, I think it'll end in 5. I think Darling. I mean, he's probably the biggest story of the whole playoffs, just because if you consider the fact that 2 springs ago, Corey Crawford was in the process of leading the Blackhawks to the Stanley Cup. And what's interesting is that Corey Crawford really didn't have a great second half of last year's postseason. Obviously the Kings were a big part of that, and you could make the case that the Kings that series was just so up and down and roller coaster and high and low that some of the goals, were just part of a crazy and incredible Western Conference Final Series. But then you see him give up all those goals in Game 1, and then the goals in Game 2, and they go to Darling. And honestly, I mean, if I'm Nashville, I gotta just be. I don't even know how I could deal with this right now, because the Predators have put up a fight, probably a better fight than any of us expected from them, and they're going home with the potential of the likelihood of it being their last home playoff game or last home game of the season. So I mean, you could make 2 multi-overtime games in games 1 and 4. They blew the 3-0 lead in Game 1. They had chances. I mean, there were points when they were driving play, and Rinne stood on his head at points in overtime in Game 4. I mean, he was really, really good in that game. And they had a couple leads they blew. They had the lead twice in that Game 4, and all of a sudden it starts looking like, well, hey, maybe this is the Predators. Maybe we were wrong. Maybe they're going to put up a little fight here. And then, oh, by the way, again, Brent Seabrook gets the winner 1 minute into overtime, and suddenly the Predators are on the brink. Now, I mean, maybe the Preds show some pride, but, Scott Darling's been fantastic. And, of course he has. It's Chicago, right?
But here's a question, though, and I don't know the answer to this, just posing it as a question. How many teams ever have won a Stanley Cup with another goaltender, with the goaltender that won a cup for them in the past healthy on the bench?
How many have made the only one that stands to, or that I remember in recent memory is, I mean, obviously it wasn't even the Stanley Cup, but Thomas Vokoun took the Penguins to the conference final a couple of years ago, with Fleury on the bench there. I mean, yeah, it's a really good point, because it doesn't happen often. I mean, maybe the old Detroit teams with Ozzy in goal. But to be fair, to be frank, I don't really remember. But I mean, it's a good point that you make, Dave, because it's one of those things that you don't really that in this time of the year, goaltending is so important, but it's also so fickle, because you just have to go with the hot hand.
Exactly.
And if you don't, you're going to rue the time you didn't. I mean, because you look at what the Penguins went through with Fleury. I mean, every game is so essential. It's a huge story. It's a huge deal, and every game being so essential, the momentum swings and whatnot. It's true. You're right. I mean, you have to go with the guy who's going to win you tonight, and that's what Ottawa did. Andrew Hammond got them there, but Craig Anderson was the guy at that point. And you just get the sense that Darling is the guy right now. It may not be the case down the stretch. I mean, you look at what Anaheim did last year. They toggled goalies, basically. I mean, at this time of the year, I would say it's less about hurt feelings and egos than it is about just simply winning games.
Oh, absolutely.
But I understand what you're saying, because at some point you're going to need that guy. Probably, I mean, maybe even in the postseason, where you look at, you get in a route and you have to pull the guy to either to send a message, and then you have a shaken former number 1 guy who's cold, who hasn't played, who's been the backup, who may be a little. I mean, it seems like Corey Crawford's handling this well too.
Yeah, I mean, he was the first one out to hug him at the end of the game. I think Darling has spoken pretty well about Crawford as well. Maybe he's just buying into this team, which is a good sign if everyone is kind of on the same page here. And I didn't mean to say that as a knock on Darling. I just honestly was wondering if we've ever had a goalie who has clearly been the winning goaltender on a cup team that has all of a sudden just kind of been cast aside for someone else. Because look, I think Chicago could still win the cup. I did pick them to do it, so I'm going to stick with it right now. But
we'll have to look back into that where with the history of that, or even if Crawford gets the chance to get back in at some point. I mean, Darling's been great all year, and it doesn't look like Crawford. Crawford's basically channeling the ghost of 2013 Marc-Andre Fleury here, but it still would be important if they need him back.
Absolutely. Now saving what I think is the best series for last, because I just think it's two teams that are just gonna go all the way here, even though Minnesota holds a lead. Minnesota Wild are up 2-1 on the St. Louis Blues. Maybe a little bit of panic with the St. Louis Blues, because is this more of the same old for them with not being able to come up big in the playoffs? But give Minnesota credit. They mucked it up in Game 3. I mean, they were putting two bodies in front of the net, or they were overloading on one side, usually the left, and they were just saying, well, we're gonna make this the ugliest game possible, and we're gonna slow it down, and we're gonna make you try to beat us. Dumba has been really good for them in the playoffs. Even guys like Zucker have been really good. Zach Parise with an unbelievable goal in Game 3. Pat, I know we both kind of felt maybe this was St. Louis's year, but do you think they have enough fight to come back from this? I mean, it is only one game.
I think so. I mean, it's basically about, it could be about cultures in terms of this series, because I still think, I mean, these teams are very even. There's no question about it. But you look at how Minnesota's won games, and you look at how St. Louis won its game, and it's night and day. St. Louis did it with, puck possession and speed and Tarasenko, and you just said it. Minnesota did it with defense, and it almost did it the way St. Louis wins games, which is really interesting, because that's almost more troubling if I'm the Blues, that the Wild are beating me at my own game. But I still think this is a 7-game series. I think there's way too much skill, and I think there's too much pride in St. Louis's room than to let this go 3-1. I've been wrong. And to be honest, we talked about Jim Rutherford coaching for his job, or GMing for his job. I mean, this is Ken Hitchcock coaching for his job here, because the Blues can't have these 109-point season and go out in 5 games in the first round. It doesn't matter who you're playing against. It doesn't matter who, the opponent is hot and the goaltender is hot, and you hit a bad matchup. Results are what matter. And for the Blues to win the Central Division this year and have all the success they had this season, and with all the depth and goal scoring and all the the defense, they overcame adversity, and to go down in flames in 5 games, you have to think the Blues have more pride than that. But that being said, I'm starting to get the sense that this is Minnesota's series. You mentioned being playoff tested a lot, and Minnesota is playoff tested. I mean, they went to, where did they go to, a second overtime in Game 6 a year ago against the Blackhawks.
Yeah. In
the second round, they were 2-0 down to Colorado last year, and somehow found a way to win 4 out of 5, I'm sorry, and win that series. Winning Game 7 on the road in Colorado. Then, they were down to their 4th. It was Ilya Bryzgalov in goal last year, who was, basically fending off Blackhawks left and right. The Wild are tested, and it looks like Dubnyk is the real deal, especially this playoff or this year period, not even necessarily this playoff year. But, it doesn't seem like he's worn out quite like I kind of expected him to, especially given how he played it. Like you said, didn't face a lot in Game 3. But, you know, the Wild are a real. I mean, I know you love them and watching them, but they're a real formidable test here. We thought they would be. I still think this is probably a 7-game series, though.
Yeah, I think St. Louis will find a way. I don't know if Minnesota is quite good enough, but the one thing is that Game 4 is in Minnesota, and I think there's a lot of pressure on the Blues now that if Minnesota gets an early goal and the crowd gets rocking, it might be tough. I think for St. Louis, they have to go out and set the tone early. Let's see, David Backes make a big play here, or TJ Oshie, or someone like that, because St. Louis hasn't exactly been amazing offensively in the first 3 games.
You mentioned that, and you talk about the depth in goal scoring that St. Louis has. I mean, Tarasenko obviously the hat trick in Game 2, but
where is it?
Yeah, where's the top? Where's that top line been?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where is TJ Oshie? Where is
Steen has been
David Backes? Where is Alex Steen? I mean, you look at these guys are. I mean, the goal scorers. What? It's Schwartz and Tarasenko, and I mean, they're big players for St. Louis. But I mean, you need your top line. If you want to win a playoff series, you need your top line to deliver, and it's time for Alex Steen and David Backes and these guys to do something other than, talk a good game.
Absolutely, and that's what you're seeing from Minnesota is that the Parise line along with Pominville are scoring, and right now that's the difference.
I was going to say, we've watched Parise a long time, and that guy is relentless. That is a guy that is not going to let himself get shut out.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
it's amazing because, how many guys have that ability to say, I'm just going to work harder than you and score goals, and you're not going to stop me no matter how good your best player is. Your best defenseman's going to, shut me down. And he's just relentless.
Yeah, he really is.
He's one of a kind.
Absolutely. That goal he scored was fantastic. All right, Pat. So we'll be watching a ton of games tonight. We'll be back later in the week, too, as we get some developments here. Who knows? Maybe we're wrong about a whole lot of things, or maybe we have some quick series here. So, Pat, any last thoughts before we end it up here?
I think I'll go with one prediction, and I could be wrong. I still think Vancouver and Calgary is going to be 7. I think the 2-3-0 series are sweeps. I think Hawks are going to close them out, and I'll say Caps and Islanders will go 7 too. But who knows? We might be wrong.
I think my bold prediction here is I think Rangers win big.
Big.
I do. I think they finally put their hand on their throats. Pittsburgh.
I don't know if the Rangers are capable of winning big.
I just feel like their best game has not been played yet against Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. I think they win by maybe 3 goals tonight.
That would be something.
All right, Pat. So I'm Dave Turner along with Pat Pickens. We'll be back with more playoff stuff as things are definitely getting heated here in the National Hockey League playoffs. Take care.